Good day. We're here for our next episode of our NextGenDDS podcast. I'm Scott Menaker. I'm here with Wes Lyon, and we're here to talk today about being a CEO.
Yeah, and Scott, you have the distinct pleasure of being Dr. Scott Menaker and CEO Scott Menaker.
Yeah, so it's most people, if you think about being the CEO, you're the guy at the top, or the woman. You're the person running that business. But as a dentist, you're also, we're calling it the CEO, the Chief Economic Officer. You're going to be also the one being the number one producer. So there's kind of an added burden on that doctor who's literally, sitting in a chair, a dental chair with a handpiece in their hand, doing the dentistry, as well as running a practice. And some of them can be small and some of them can be pretty big and with lots of people. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the role that you play as a CEO and what those different functions are going to be. One, the executive. Two, we just mentioned the chief economic officer. If you're not producing it, it's not happening. And we're going to talk about some other things that you're going to do along the way.
Yeah, you can be head of HR, all sorts of things in a small business that, nobody wants to think about. And I always get this one from dentists, they don't teach us how to be business owners. I'm like, well, they don't teach you that in business school either. So you didn't miss much out on the schooling aspect of it, but there is a lot there. And whether or not you're a good owner is really going to lead into every part of your life, can be your financial success. And if you struggle being a good CEO, it's probably going to lean into a lot more stress at home as well.
No doubt about it. Because, and I used to describe being an owner of a business that literally, if you were working 4 days a week, you're going to take potentially, depending on the size of your practice, you're probably going to spend another 50% being the CEO. So you're going to be spending another 16 hours, whether it's at night, whether it's in the morning, whether it's on a weekend, working on that business. And sometimes it can be more. I know I worked really, really hard to build, a 2-doctor practice. We were doing $3 million. We were working hard. We weren't working crazy hard. But it was a big business to run with, a couple doctors. We ended up having another associate at some point right before I left, and a staff of 12. You got a lot of responsibilities in there, and you got to spend the time. You can't do it in your normal workday.
I like the way Elon Musk talks about it. Like all of the big CEOs are in the public light. I think he's the only one that's still in the weeds at his company. So like what Jeff Bezos does and what you do as a small business owner, not even remotely related. He did it 20-something years ago when he started Amazon, but he is no longer even close to in the weeds. But Elon Musk described it as, it's a lot like chewing glass.
Some days.
In some days it is. And the problem that he articulates very well is that, hey, when there is an issue in the business or there is a problem in the business, my job as CEO is to solve it, right? Nobody brings me the easy things to do. They bring me the things that nobody else can handle. And you never know when they're going to come to you, when it's going to come to your attention, what you're going to have to do. So you're going to find yourself sometimes, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, something hit my mind, realized it was screwed up. And, it's like 10:30 p.m. My wife's like, where are you going? I'm like, going to the office. She's like, what? I'm like, got something that has to get done. And it just has to get done. Got to get there, got to do it. And hopefully you don't have too many of those nights, but that's your job as CEO to make sure everything's functioning. You're going to want to, one of the topics I had was learning how to delegate. That's going to be a big part of it, but you do have to learn how to pluck out every little thing and just figure it out.
Yep. And certainly having an office manager helps. But I would just, the caution that I would say is make sure you have a qualified person. Appointing the person who's been sitting at the front desk as your office manager just because they've been there the longest doesn't make sense, and a lot of times is probably the wrong way to do it. It was kind of interesting. my wife ended up kind of earning it. She started kind of working up at the front, doing bookkeeping, and then working up at the front, and then part-time, and then working full-time. And then it evolved into some, to the position where she had earned the ability to manage and run things, not just, hey, she was in the right place at the right time. And it was funny when she left, go take care of our granddaughter when she was born. For about 3 years, she became a nanny, which she loved. But I had a dental assistant that had gone from working in the back just as chair side at 23 years old to working in the front, scheduling hygiene, then being the treatment coordinator, and then doing financing. And she'd kind of grown into that role, and she took that position. And then when she left, we kind of hired from within. We interviewed other people, but we had the next person who had done that. And it was, she kind of thought that she was obligated to get that job because she had kind of done all the steps and had been all the positions. But, we did a full interview and had a couple really hard sit downs and hard questionings to make sure that she earned it. So don't just appoint somebody because you think they're right. I know, Wes, when you took over the business, you had staff that had been there a while, and you had to make some changes because they just weren't going in the direction you wanted to go in.
No, that's a tough one. But when you do delegate, and I'm glad you brought up the office manager is not the solution to all your problems. If you get a good one, it is a solution to a lot of your problems, and not all of them. However, too often, you hit the nail on the head. Somebody's just been there for a while, so now they're office manager because I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And I see this a lot, and I will bluntly ask the doctor, I'm like, is this person an office manager, or does she have a title and $5 an hour more because she runs your payroll and knows what everyone makes?
And what I find, and certainly I've talked to many, many doctors, is you end up, if you appoint the wrong person, they're terrible at handling staff, which is one of the key roles that you want them to do. They're terrible at handling patient complaint. They're just sitting back with a big head running things, thinking that they run things. So, I for a lot of years, I was the office manager before I had somebody to run it for me. And that allowed me to grow the practice because I didn't have to deal with all the minutia. I could delegate a lot of things off my plate to go do a lot of the really more engagement and growth things that really needed to come from my desk.
Yeah, and I think, this is our follow-up from the last episode, but this goes right in. Like your first thing as CEO is you need to list out all the things you're doing, all the things that need to get done, and figure out what can be delegated. And some people struggle with this on the front end. I don't think probably towards the end of your career, you probably didn't struggle with it at all, but I'll admit I struggled with it. I'm pretty young, and a lot of the doctors going to be going into the CEO role pretty young. And then all of a sudden, you're potentially telling somebody 20 years older than you to do some administrative task for you. And it's like, it's only awkward in your mind.
That's right. And you've got to get over the awkwardness because a lot of times people hold on to staff and hold on to employees. It doesn't matter what business you're in, that are just they're not sitting in the right chair. And I think every HR person will tell you that, make sure that they're sitting in the right chair. And if they're not, very nicely, or sometimes not so nicely, you've got to go make a change. You want to do it nice if you can. And if you can't, you've got to move on. And so that's where, as the CEO, you're dealing with, engagement, enrichment. You're trying to teach them more. You're going to be the efficiency officer. You're going to be as part of that CEO, the E in it. And you're going to be the entrepreneur to a degree. And those roles take time. They take goals as well. But you're going to be handling, you're going to be the HR person. If somebody needs to be let go, I did it. I would ask people to leave. I hated it. Even if they were the wrong person, you just hate as a person, you just don't like to let people go. But sometimes you have to do that. And it's funny. I just said over time, my staff would make that decision for me. if they couldn't get along with the staff, we had a new person, they weren't fitting in and they weren't blending in and doing their job and pulling their weight, my staff let me know. And once you make the change, a lot of times they were looking at me like, what the hell took you so long? That's a hard one, but you've got to go do that. What's in the best interest of your business?
No, definitely. And, you bring up these points, and if you want to bring the entrepreneur, you want to bring the excitement, all that, you can't have a bad apple there. So I actually find it fascinating for those of you that watch college football. Nick Saban talks about this a lot and how he managed his program. And, something that really struck home to me was he goes, look, my job all spring is to figure out who's an A person, who can become an A person, and who needs to go.
Right.
Simple as that. He said, my job is to run this program, and if we're going to be the best that we can be, then we've got to get the C people off the bus. And it's unfortunate, but your job is to get the C people off the bus. And you mentioned towards the end, your staff had enough trust in you that they'd pretty much let you know. But at the beginning, they don't have that trust in you. So if you can't go in there and you can't terminate somebody that needs to get terminated, nobody else respects you.
That's right. They're waiting for you to make that call. I had a hygienist who was great at treatment planning. She was probably, at the time in my career, I was really young. She was better than I was at it. But she just did not blend in with the staff. And I held on for a while because I needed what she was doing, but then I had to make a change in spite of that because, she was helping me in a way, but she was not helping my team. And so I needed to make a change at that point. But, that's probably one of the hard ones. You're going to also be handling all the legal and the banking and the insurance and all of those kind of decisions. Those are all going to kind of rest on you. You may get some input from some staff, but a lot of it, you're going to kind of be on your own. I know I had we had a 401k for my staff, and I was, doing a safe harbor contribution. So we had a fair amount of money in that. And I had a friend of mine who had been handling some personal stuff and as well as handling this for the staff. And I just think at some point, his business had grown and he kind of took his eye off the ball. At least that was my impression. And I had to fire him. Literally, we're still friends. We got through it, but I just said, I just have lost faith in your oversight of what you're doing for me personally and professionally. And that was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do. I think looking back on it, he probably didn't like it very much at the time, but I think I had to do what I thought was right for myself and my practice and my team, not let my friendship or this person just be there. He was doing an okay job. Maybe he was doing a good job. I just didn't think he was. And so I made a change.
Yeah, making change is tough. But yeah, as CEO, first thing is learn to delegate. Second thing, you've got to get the right team in place. That's going to be, whether or not you're firing your accountant and you're firing, it doesn't matter. None of it's ever fun. Having to get rid of somebody and get the right person in there. But if you don't have, if you're trying to have an A practice, an A+ practice, or you're trying to grow and you don't have a team that also shares that mentality, you're going to fail right off the bat. So that is probably, I want to hear from you, but that's the complaint I hear most from dentists. The thing that they hate doing the most is getting the team together. And I think it's everyone knows, like when I meet with somebody, I had a client came to me once and I got to know her CPA very well. And the CPA just called me out of the blue to thank me. And he goes, I'm just curious here. I've been telling her these 4 people need to get fired for 10 years and she hasn't done it. How'd you get her to do it? And people know what needs to get done, but the failure to be CEO, a lot of times it's just failure to take the action.
Yeah, I think what your point is, it's not always. Most of the time, it's good. You're making good decisions and happier ones, and sometimes you're going to have some that are just not going to be not going to be good. I had an associate. Everybody talks about how it takes a while to find the right one to become a partner. My first one, after being solo for 12 years, was a terrific doc who grew up in my practice as a patient. Broke my heart 18 months later when he said he wanted to go back to specialty school. And my next one, with me about 10 months or so, and basically we were making a decision on kind of adding, I think it was CEREC at the time, and he basically said, I don't believe in it. And he's been out of school maybe a year, and I had a few choice words, but basically I said, in essence, I said, what the hell do you know? I said, I've been looking at this for the last 18 months, and I had spreadsheets and pros and cons and all of those things that I had written down, and my team was ready and we were going, and he wasn't buying in. And I just said, Doc, I said, this is my practice. And I said, we just probably need to go ahead and part ways. If we're not going down this path together, then we're just gonna part ways. We'll be friends. I'll wish you luck. I'll help you however I can, but you staying here long term is not an option if that's the way you're going to view this. And it's been really funny, Wes. I've run into him a number of times, and I don't see him often, but he said, first time I saw him, probably 18 years later, was, I need to apologize to you. I said, for what? He goes, I was just a stupid young punk. And those are his exact words. And he said, I just was too stupid to kind of stop and listen and learn, and said, I thought I kind of knew everything. But making that decision to let an associate go was pretty big. But it was the right decision. And he would say it was the right decision for me because I had to go out and learn what it really meant to do it the right way. And I wasn't in the right mindset when I was with you. And I apologize for that. And so it's been kind of, I've run into him a number of times and we laugh about it. And he's done really well. He's bought a practice a number of years later, and it's just done really well. And he grew up.
Yeah, some people need that one.
Sometimes age is one of those things. But
yeah, you're going to have to, it's kind of funny though, because you just think of what age he was then.
Yep.
Some people are going to be that age and they're going to be thrust into this CEO role before they know it. And I mean, I'm trying to think of what the youngest practice owner is. I know probably had a guy, it was his parents' practice, but probably 26.
You're just not, I'll just tell you, you're not ready for that role. Sometimes you get thrown into it, but you might do okay. But some of this, I say it takes, in most businesses, it's going to take you 4 to 5 years to really figure it out. That's clinical as well as the business side. And if you've got no experience, when I do the buyer rep and I'm talking to doctors, they're like, oh, how do I do this? And so fortunately, I said, listen, call me. After our engagement is done, I'll be your friend, and call me. And so I do get docs calling me and go, I got this real problem. Can you help me? Or I'm thinking about doing this. What suggestions would you have? So that's the wise older guy who's been around the block, sharing some of that, but sometimes it's going to be some failures too.
Yeah, sometimes it's funny. They call you and, they already know what they need to do. They just need some reassurance,
Kind of like your kids.
Yeah, going, I'm not crazy, am I? It's like, no, you're not crazy. We need to do it. But it's just an interesting role because something's always different. There's always some new challenge. I think a couple episodes we're talking about goals. As CEO, you really got to learn to set goals. You got to learn how to execute them. You got to learn how to get your team to execute. So not only we kind of went into, hey, it's your job to get the losers off the bus here, right? And go find some new winners to get on your bus here that you're taking on this journey. But then you've got to get them excited, engaged. You've got to be a leader. And this is one I see another, I kind of see young doctors struggle with is you're not there to be their friend. You can be friendly, but you're not going to be their friend. My wife actually struggles with this one more than me. We were somewhere, it's like, oh, like, I think everyone's going out here. I'm like, yeah, we're not going. She's like, why not? They didn't invite you. I'm like, do you really think that these people, like, put yourself in their shoes, want to go spend their night out with me? I'm like, I'm their boss.
You're a pretty good guy anyway.
But I'm still their boss. Like, I don't, I could remember when I was working for John, it's not like, oh, I'm out at this place and like, oh yeah, we'll just, we'll go hang out after. I'm like, now I have to watch what I say. I can't just be like, it's still your boss.
Right. One of the, you were talking about, in kind of working with your team and engagement. And that's one of the biggest things is you're going to really be the biggest trainer that's on this staff. And I used to always look at it as if my staff wasn't doing what I needed them to do, one, it was either not the right person or I probably had not trained them and explained what I needed out of them the right way. And if I then did that and then they couldn't do it, then we knew where the problem lied. But so I took, for me, it was kind of a personal thing. I spent a lot of time working with my staff. I had two of the best dental assistants I ever had started with me as 19-year-olds who did one of these dumb 6-week dental assistant courses where you're really qualified to do nothing when you come out of it.
No way. 6 weeks isn't enough time to learn up.
In many cases, they've never sat chairside and held a suction tip. And so, one of them had gone through a class. She started working for an endodontist. 2 months later, she got fired. And because I think she knew my office manager, or that she knew her, she said, come interview her. Well, Amanda came and literally, she worked chair side with me. I spent a lot of time showing her how to position her hand, hold the handpiece, how to rinse things, how to get instruments, pass it, mix things. It wasn't, and I did some of it while sitting next to her, but some of it, hey, we had a break or we'd take time at lunch. I'd put her, with the top dental assistants around. Same thing. Casey came to me, again, 19 years old. One of my office staff met her she was working at a tanning bed place. And Casey had just finished one of these classes. 19 years old. She came in and literally, I couldn't have asked for two better dental assistants. And Amanda ended up becoming our treatment coordinator, helping run the front office. Casey ended up going back to school to become a hygienist and is now a hygienist. And it's just kind of sometimes, but it took a lot of time. And I was willing to do it because one, I was having a hard time, and certainly in today's world, trying to find staff is really hard. But this was 12 years ago or more. I found two of the best dental assistants and two of the really nicest people around and the hardest working people, and just gave them the right opportunity. And I trained them to be good. And I trained them to be great. And they ended up setting the world on fire.
Oh, that's phenomenal. But no, I think you're spot on that you've got to put the time into them. It's going to be a return on your investment. And sometimes people struggle, oh, I'm not getting this out of somebody. And I've learned throughout the years to be able to ask the right questions. From what the doctor's response is, I can kind of glean, is the doctor falling short of setting expectations, or is this just a bad employee? I get pretty darn good at spotting that out now, but sometimes go, hey, I think we need to give this person a second chance, and you need to sit down with her and tell her what you're expecting, because it doesn't sound like she knows what you're expecting. And that one can be really, really tough. I certainly struggle with this one, and I try to be self-aware of it. But I just expect people to figure it out or do it or understand. I see this vision of, hey, we need to get here, and I know what needs to get done, but I'm really, really bad at articulating what needs to get done. And this is a very common problem, I think, for people that run small businesses. It's not just me. It's kind of across the board. When I hear another dentist struggling with the same thing as CEO, I'm like, well, yeah, you haven't told your team what you're expecting out of them. But then, I have to look in the mirror, and every time I say it, I go, that sounds like me. But yeah, you've got to be able to sit there and you've got to set the expectations, follow up with them, put your time into them to grow them into what you need. And that's just, it's when you're a small business owner and you're wearing all these hats, that's not the thing that makes you good at being a small business owner, but it's something that you've got to get better at.
Yeah. And I think when you do that, what you develop then is this bond and trust. Again, you don't have to be friends with and go out with them. But I mean, I will at times I'll go meet some of my old staff. We'll go have a beer. We'll catch drinks. They'll even go do it with my wife at times. They we text every once in a while. I don't have to see them often, but I had their personal interest at heart. I understood what was going on with them personally and their families. And when you build that trust, I used to call it my staff. I used to say, my staff treated my practice like they were owners. And they didn't own anything. They got treated well. We did nice things for them. I wasn't paying them. I was paying them a good salary, giving good benefits, but it wasn't over the top. But they trusted me, and we had a relationship that was like, I've got Laura, one of my hygienists. I mean, she's still working at the practice. We joke, she started at 23, and now 33 years later, she's left at times to go, moved for her family. She came back. She worked part-time. She worked full-time. She left the dentistry. And she still just keeps coming back because it's home. And when you do that, my dental assistant for 28 years would have made an amazing dentist. She wasn't that thing, but she didn't have that skill set. Obviously, she didn't go to school, but she was so gifted, and I could have never. She could read my mind, and I paid and compensated her well. I took care of her, but you have to work hard at those things. Not just, hey, I paid you your salary, sit down, shut up, and do your job. That won't work.
No, it won't. And it's a struggle for a lot of dentists to fill that CEO role. And I think that leadership, that staff part, that's probably the most important, because if you can get that piece of it right, and you can get a team that really believes in you, is loyal to you, and wants to help you, they will solve a lot of your problems for you, right? Little problems will start to disappear, and, I took care of that. And you'll get to sit there and spend your time on the big decisions. Because if you're spending a ton of your time on little, nitty gritty administrative items that somebody else could be taking care of, either you haven't delegated well, the staff isn't excited. There's something there. The staff should be excited and just know that, hey, I can take care of that, and
they want that. They want to feel like they're doing more than just, the minimum, and that you're giving them the ability. You got to earn it, but they've earned the right to make some of those decisions, and they know when to come talk to you. And my office managers at times would say, Doc, this one's for you. And sometimes I didn't want them, but you just knew that it had gotten, it was at the right level, that it was a decision I had to make, not they could go make it for, on their own.
Yeah, I always kind of tell people when they come to me and they kind of, this and this is what we want to do. And I kind of give them this look of like, that's not a me decision. Like, did you really, and over the last couple of years, they've gotten to know, like recently I had one of them just email me, say, hey, just to let you know, I bought another license when you see it was for this. We needed it for this person. I'm like, oh, great, cool. Thanks for the heads up. Now that I want to see it on the credit card, I'm not going to be odd. But, a couple of years ago, she probably would come and ask me. I'm like, don't ask me if we can spend $60 to get this person the license they need. Just, you have a credit card. Just swipe the dang credit card. But then other times there's, the employee that's been with me the longest, she'll come in my office and, can you take a look at this? I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. And she'll just kind of stand there and like, it's a right now thing. And she's like, right now, you need to make the decision. You need to do it. I'm like, got it. And I'll sit there and, all right, give it back to her. Make sure she's got it. But, once you get them to that point, your life becomes so much easier.
You become right. As we talk about, it's like, if you're spending all your time working in the business, then you never work on it. And I would spend, that time we were talking about, those 2 extra full days that I was working on the business, it was writing, it was preparing for goal setting. It was writing new protocols. It was writing action steps that I felt were important that I was going to talk with the team. Those are those moments that sometimes you just needed quiet time away from the office. Our practice started at 7 a.m. I was usually up at 5. Sometimes I went to the gym. Sometimes I would run, but a lot of times I was at the office by 5:30, paying bills, getting rid of emails, sending notes to either whatever it needed to be handled, following up on things, doing some lab work that was going to allow me to be ready for the day and to be productive so that I didn't get bogged down in all of that during it. And so that was my, special quiet time. And my wife and I still, now that I'm retired from clinical dentistry, we're still up early in the morning, and we're wired that way.
Yeah, I'm that way too. You have to find your time to do this stuff. I prefer the morning. I'm kind of like you, but then my wife will bug me sometimes at like 5:30 in the morning, start talking to someone. I'm like, no. The first 3 to 4 hours of my day today are dedicated towards this list of items, and nothing else can bother me.
Right. And I always wanted to have the evening, especially when I had 3 boys and they were playing sports and I was coaching, and I got home at 4:00, and most of the time I wasn't on the clock with them. Sometimes if they went to bed, if I had something I had to get done, and there's always exceptions, but you just got to find as time as that CEO to make sure that you're handling, all of these topics. It's not just, being their number one producer. You've got to be handling all these other pieces. And if you need help and you need to call an expert for some of this stuff, you do it. If you need some, tax advice and guidance, Wes, your group, you guys are set up to help doctors manage some of this stuff so that they don't have to go spend, 100 hours of time trying to study and look and read, and then they're not sure what they're listening to on the internet too.
No, definitely. I think, my big keys is takeaways here. To be successful as CEO, the first thing is, you have to learn to be a leader, and you have to learn to make tough decisions. You have to learn to manage the staff. If you can't get those right out of the gate, it's just going to spread into every aspect of your life when all of a sudden you're having to pay every single bill. You're going to deal with every single patient complaint. You're doing everything because nobody views you as a leader, or the expectations aren't right there. So you've got to be able to get your time back so you can spend your time on the actual CEO decisions, not the day-to-day. As you said, Scott, you don't want to be working in the business all the time. You want to be working on the business. You brought up another great point there. We're talking about we like our mornings, everything. You're also going to have to learn to buy some of your time back strategically.
Yep.
From my entire life, I always live my life. Nobody will ever change my oil, fix my car, or mow my lawn. I haven't touched either of those 3 things in 2 years. It just gets to a point where I'm sitting there. I remember I called my dad, and it's a Saturday morning, and I'm fixing the light bulb in a Lexus, and I've discovered that the headlight moves. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm 4 hours into a headlight job here that... I thought it was going to take me 20 minutes. And my dad, he just very bluntly, instead of giving me an answer, goes, how much revenue do you produce per hour when you're working on your business? And I was like, oh, I don't know, a lot. And he's like, how much does it cost to have somebody replace your headlight? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah,
$50.
One of my dear friends, and Mark Hyman is one of the biggest thought leaders out there in dentistry over the last 20 years. And Mark said something many years ago when I started referring a lot of things out, and when a patient asked for something, he said, what you need is not what I do. So it's making decisions about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And that's part of being a good CEO as well. How do you have somebody else do some of these things for you so you can spend your time talking about the important stuff? So,
so learn to lead, learn to manage your time. And then Learn to pivot quickly would probably be my third one. It's not failure, just pivot quickly. Give it a shot. Doesn't work. Have no shame in it. And I think that kind of goes back to leadership. If you're unwilling to admit your mistakes or unwilling to try things and move on, what do you think the people working for you are going to do? They're going to play it safe, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to sit there,
I had one hygienist, Missy was great. She was kind of quiet at times, but when she would say something at a staff meeting, and if she disagreed with me, I knew she was right, and it was like, when she was in, but when she was also, she didn't think it was a good idea. She wasn't doing it because she didn't want to do it. She just didn't think it was a good idea for the business. And sometimes you got to listen to those voices too. So you're not going to always get it right. We've talked about that a lot. But you just got to be able to step up and understand you've got big shoes to fill, a big role. There's a lot going on, and you just got to be ready to take on that leadership role. And if you're not ready to do that or don't want to do that, work for somebody. Just be an associate long term, work in corporate, be something where you don't have to take that role. But if you take that role, we're advocating very strongly, do it right.
Definitely, because it's going to be your personal success, your financial success, and it's very financially and personally rewarding to take that role as a dentist. So we're not trying to scare you off of it. It's just, hey, this is what's coming. Be ready for it, and do these things well, and get help.
Yep, and it's for me. It's why I'm here with the McGill Hill Group. Was I always loved that CEO side of things, and so as I retired from practice and am now helping in the transition side, for me it was just the next cool thing to go do, because it's something that I really loved. I really loved that aspect of it. So find your niche, find what makes it, what works for you, and then
I guess we should give everybody the warning. Those that do it and end up liking it, it becomes really addictive and hard to step away from. I was joking. I was in San Francisco with a couple buddies that run various companies. So everyone at the table runs a company, kind of turns over and goes, Wes, what's next for you? I'm like, I don't have a clue. Whatever. I'm like, are you actually going to be able to sell this thing? He goes, yeah, that's why I'm asking. I was at home with my mom, and I told my mom I might sell the business in 5 years, and, I'm going to move to Italy, and I'm going to, learn how to make olive oil. And she goes, you're going to go out there and buy up every olive oil farm in sight, try to flip it. And he just, he goes, I had the self-realization that the game is the game, and I just love being CEO.
Yeah. And it's for me, it's a different role, but it's really cool where I get to help I help to get young docs and older ones too, kind of be successful as the CEO. And that's really the lot thing. It's what you're doing. That's what our firm is doing. And we really enjoy it.
So yeah, it takes a few years to get under your belt, but once you're there and you've got them under control, amazing feeling. So we recommend everyone tries to go into practice ownership. Ultimately, if you decide it's not for you, great self-awareness. However, don't be scared of it. It's a challenge. It's a great one, and it's very fulfilling.
Well, we've enjoyed our discussion here on being the CEO and some of the qualities that it takes, and we look forward to joining you on our next episode of NextGenDDS.
We'll be back with you soon. Thanks for joining.